Hello, 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 hello. Are we live? Are we here? I think we're here. Yo, everybody. How's everyone doing? Yay, yay. Tim Coolish, of course, is here. Did you miss Prey? Yeah, Prey was earlier. It's all over. But that's okay, because we've got a lot to do tonight. Everybody's ready, and I think we are. We're just going to get on with the festivities. So, how about if I just flick us over to here? Come on, you. And lo and behold, here we are. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a very, very, very special stream. I am elated and delighted to be able to welcome you here today. Oh, look at me. I've moved. Look, of all people. There we go. That's better. I am delighted to be able to host this thing tonight because we're basically, in the end, it's a tribute to one of the all-time great RPGs, if anything, and one of the greatest games. Period. If you've never played Betrayal at Krondor, you really do owe it to yourself. There we go. So listen, first of all, let me introduce to you the head writer, co-designer, and Renaissance man extraordinaire. I don't know. Neal, wacko. Yes, wacko. Neal Hallford. Welcome to the GOG's Twitch channel.
Well, thank you very, very much. I'm really glad to be here, and love to see all these wonderful people that are chatting things up here on the side. That's awesome.
Perfect. Also, we have now Ilana C Myer, who now her association with Betrayal at Krondor is not an absolute direct one, but we can certainly say number one, Ilana is a very acclaimed author. Her latest book, The Poet King, was deemed by Kirkus Reviews, which is this is no small feat. Kirkus Reviews actually said that The Poet King is one of the best sci-fi fantasy novels of 2020, which is quite amazing. I think it just came out in paperback.
Yes.
There you go. Just perfect. But we're also her connection to Betrayal at Krondor, of course, is the tremendous influence that this game had on her life, her writing, everything. So, hello, Ilana.
Hi, great to be here.
Good. Glad to have you. And Damjan Mozetič, who you could, if you've been frequenting my channel and this one as well, you might know him as Rontavan. And he is the creator of a game. Now, who knows exactly when it's going to be coming out, but it's certainly something worth waiting for. There is a demo of this game available. It is a marvelous spiritual successor to Betrayal at Krondor, and it's called Call of Saregnar. So again, let me introduce Damjan Mozetič.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, I'm really glad to have you here. So we have a lot of stuff that we want to cover, but first of all, I guess we go to the man himself, Neal, and just if you could just let us know something about your beginnings, your beginnings yourself, and also in the industry as well.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So first, there was supernova that exploded, that created heavy metals.
Right.
Okay. Okay. We're not going back quite.
Not quite.
Okay. But no, I actually started off in a path where I was interested in computer games. Whenever I was a kid, I had a group of Dungeons and Dragons group that I played with. I was also hugely influenced by a game called Call of Cthulhu from Chaosium. So if you know Call of Cthulhu or RuneQuest, that's actually a game system that was actually the system that I loved the most as a kid. But I went to college. They weren't really teaching game design whenever I got started, because in the mid to late 80s. And so I decided I was going to go into something that I actually thought I'd be able to make a living at, which was in radio, television, and film production, with emphasis in radio. And I'd worked at a radio station right out of high school. And not too long after I graduated from college, a good buddy of mine named Ken Mayfield called me up because he had gotten a job with New World Computing. And so those, of course, were the people who made Might and Magic.
Mm-hmm.
And so they had a job opening for a writer, and I accepted that little position, and so entered my into the world of computer gaming. And I hadn't really expected I was going to be able to do that because I was terrible at math. And still am. So I always assumed that in order to be working in the computer gaming industry back in the day, games were made by programmers. You didn't really have separate, someone over here is doing the writing and someone else is doing the music or whatever. Usually you had kind of some insane polymath that was doing everything themselves. And so I thought that you had to be good at those things. So I hadn't really expected that I'd actually ever get a job in the gaming industry. But they needed a writer, and they were looking for someone who was a writer, and so I got on with New World Computing, and thus began my trek into the industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems a common thread for a lot of people is that they didn't necessarily intend to, but somehow they managed to find their way in.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it was definitely truer in my time period, simply because people weren't necessarily looking at that as a career path. Most people didn't even think of it as a way to make money, because back in the day, people were, like John Van Caneghem, who had founded New World Computing, and Ken and Roberta Williams. They were making these games in their garages and putting them in Ziploc bags and selling them in the back of like tech magazines. Yeah, and
if you sold like 50,000 copies of a game, that was pretty.
Oh, that was huge. That was
massive.
Gigantic back in the day. That was a mega bestseller.
Exactly. Ilana, maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself and your history and your eventual sort of introduction to Betrayal Krondor and whatnot.
So I started out from a very, very young age. I think I was 6 when I got my first Sierra games. And I just fell in love with adventure games, right away. And so I went through all the Sierra games that looked appealing to me when I was a kid. They tended to be fantasy, or like I really loved lore-bow games because I love murder mysteries. At a certain point, I had exhausted all the ones that looked appealing to me, and I just kept seeing promotional materials for this game that I wasn't drawn to RPGs because I wasn't like that's the kind of gaming that really drew me so much. But I kept seeing like screen caps from this game, and the writing was always like really extraordinary. I was like, it looks like the writing is really important in this game, And so I just had to see what it was, and then I completely got sucked in. This was when I was a teenager. I did not know what was going to happen to me when I started this game, and I got completely into it. My family had moved to a country where I didn't speak the language, so I didn't have friends. I know that's very sad, whatever. So having that kind of fantasy escape was really a godsend. And there was just this one summer where there was nothing to do because also there was no camp. Don't ask. So I just spent the whole summer playing Betrayal at Krondor until, finally near the end of the summer, I finished the game. And anyone who has played the game knows that the ending is very intense, and I cried at the end.
I've had so many people say that I ruined their childhood. So
no, you didn't ruin my childhood. I want to be clear. I think it was a great narrative choice. I would rather be emotionally affected by a story than not.
Right.
But I was, at the time my family was living in this apartment where we were all on top of each other. So I went to the bathroom to cry so nobody would see me crying about a computer game because I was embarrassed. But
but that's the amazing thing. I know playing the game myself back in the day, and this is at a time when game playing was not necessarily as respected, shall we say, as it is today. And I know myself there were people that I wouldn't actually tell I actually played games because, of course, that's what kids do. And I was in my early 30s at the time, So you're not supposed to be playing these things as an adult. But the one thing that a lot of people didn't realize, especially with Betrayal at Krondor, is how literate it was. It beyond just beyond just the game mechanics and the combat and the game engine and moving around in the world, it was extraordinarily literate. There was a story that just bound it all together. You know, and I think that's an important factor in the success of the game. Really.
Well, we had a lot of discussions about what we wanted to accomplish with Betrayal at Krondor, and the discussions were going on back then about whether video games were an art, and what qualifies to make something an art. I mean, I don't know that at the end of the day that we are really that concerned about whether we were going to be in literary journals or anything like that.
Right.
But my goal from day one is I want something that moves the player, and it's not just the only emotional reaction is not about rage quitting. It's about emotionally investing the player in what's going on, and so I was very happy that we got the reactions that we did.
Certainly, absolutely, and tremendously. Damjan, maybe you can. Same question. I mean, your beginnings as in gaming and in coming to the point of a game design, and the effect of Krondor on you.
Yeah, I might as well start with Betrayal at Krondor because my childhood started with Betrayal at Krondor.
Yeah, sure.
I must have been 13 or 14 when I first got it. It was a Slovenian magazine, a poor Slovenian magazine, but nonetheless, there was an article inside it, a single-page article. And it was a review, not nowadays, that I look back onto it, it wasn't a particularly good review, or it had a lot of mistakes. I guess the guy who wrote the article didn't play the game really. He just I don't know, read about it somewhere. But anyway, the way he described the game to me, it totally took me over. So the first thing the next morning, I called my local pirate to get those 7 discs, so I could play it. Yeah, back then we actually didn't get games, boxed games. We pirated everything. But now I think I purchased the Betrayal at Krondor boxed edition many times over. So I think my sin is
absolved. You're being absolved.
My sin is absolved. Yeah.
Well, it's up to Neal. Neal can.
Well,
and Neal, do I have your blessing?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I actually learned English playing this game. Yeah, I mean, we had English at school, but it was the game that taught me most of English. Yeah, I played with the dictionary, and I still enjoyed it a lot. It's moved me like no other game ever. It's like coming home. It's it's perfect escapism.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things about it. I think that really sets it apart is, as I mentioned before, the game mechanics of the game are super solid. The combat system is really involving, all the traps, everything, but it's held together by a story about characters you care about, and that without that, it would still be a good game. But I think it's the entire package, and just the fact of how well it came together under pretty intense circumstances for. Actually, about the beginnings of the game itself, probably Neal. That would be a good place to start.
Sure. So whenever John Cutter, who was my boss and the person who officially holds the title of designer on the game, of course, we actually ended up co-designing the title together, but we kind of took different pieces of it. But John Cutter and I had met while we were both working at New World Computing. And he had gotten an offer to go up to Dynamics to work for them. And before he left, I said, I really want to work with you again, because John was someone who really took me under his wing and taught me a lot. You guys sell Cinemaware titles. Of course, John came from Cinemaware. The game Wings was his baby. And we want to talk about another story, a game that has a story that's sort of surprising for a flight simulator, basically, World War I flight simulator. And John had done a lot with story, and he really loved storytelling that I had done in that he'd seen me doing for Planet's Edge and Might and Magic at New World. But anyway, I'd said that if something opens up at Dynamics, I really would like to come up and follow you up there. And also, too, is just they were up in Eugene in the Pacific Northwest, and that's my biome, man. I like trees and mountains, and that's the kind of dude I am. But anyhow, so Jeff Tennell, who was the person who owned Dynamics, had read Ray's book Silverthorn, which of course is the second or the third book in the original Midkemian trilogy, depending on whether you're splitting up Magician into one book or two. It was originally released as one book, got split into two later, just because it's a massive tome. But anyway, Silverthorn, he'd read the book Silverthorn, and he said, I think this would make a really great game for us to adapt. And so he had contacted Ray Feist and said, hey, we'd like to have you hire you and adapt Silverthorn as a game. And Ray said, that's a really bad idea, because first of all, you can't afford me. And he says, what you want to do is you want to license the universe and you want to develop a game on your own. And so that's exactly what they decided they were going to do. So he taps John to take over charge of this particular project. And then just shortly thereafter, he calls me up on the phone and says, Neal, I'd like you to come up and write for this one. John sort of flabbergasted me because he said, I think you're the only person in the game industry that's capable of writing this, which was a gigantic compliment coming from someone who had worked for CinemaWare, and I had such respect for the stuff that they were doing there. And so I was a little bit blown away, but of course I wasn't going to say no. And also, I was going to be adapting the work of a New York Times best-selling fantasy author. So, again, I'm not gonna say no. This is an opportunity for me to really get something on my own. Because while I was at New World, I really enjoyed working on the Might and Magic series, but that was always John Van Canegum's kind of baby. Mm-hmm. And I worked on Planet's Edge, but I was definitely had training wheels on while I was doing Planet's Edge. That was my first beginning to end game. But anyhow, mm-hmm. So that's how things got started. It was John and I looking at the Midkemian universe and looking at Silverthorn. And I said, I think that you don't want to adapt Silverthorn, because my personal feeling is that as a gamer and as a person who enjoys fantasy fiction, if I've read the book, I don't want to have to go back and play the book that I've already read, because right. First of all, I already know what's going to happen. So either A, I have to fundamentally change events so much that it doesn't make any sense that I'm calling this, Silverthorn, because you've changed all the events. So it's not really the same experience anyway. So mm-hmm. I said, what you want to do is, there's a gap in Ray's books. He had written so through Magician through Darkness at Southeners were a series of books, and that he had written another book called Kings of the Blood, and so Princes of the Blood. And between Darkness at Southeners and Princes of the Blood, there's a 20-year gap. And I said, what we want to do is we want to go in and we want to find a spot halfway between those two books and create a new story set in between those two books that kind of bridges what happened in that 20-year gap. And so we see, because James, Jimmy the Hand, goes from being a street thief at the end of the first series of books to being a baronet by the time you get to Princes of the Blood. So how does that happen? How does Jimmy the Hand become a baronet? And we have everything. There's, Locklear has a rather tragic offstage, and I frankly always thought that he was robbed of having a heroic death in Princes of the Blood. And I said, I want to go back and give Lockie more of a storyline.
Wait a minute. He dies?
Sorry. Well, not only does he die, he dies off screen, basically while they're off on this other adventure down in Great Kesh. And so he gets killed. And I always said, whenever I was reading the books, when we were doing the work, I said, I am completely pissed off that though Locklear he's kind of a funky kind of character, but I loved him. He was an important character in the first three books, and I just hated that Ray didn't give him a very heroic ending. So I said, I want to go back and give him something better to do and give him a larger role. So his inclusion in Betrayal at Krondor was me trying to address his rather summary death that happens in Prince of the Blood. And I know why Ray does it. You can't give everybody a heroic death, but he was the main character, damn it.
This brings up a good question, actually. First of all, I was going to say one thing about this game too is that even if you're not familiar with confession, I've never read any of Feist books. None. I know, I'm crazy, but
neither have I. I haven't read any of them.
Yeah, who needs them? Who needs them? No. But the thing is, I'm just saying that as someone who didn't read the books, you can jump into the game and you catch on to the story right away, which in itself is a good accomplishment to be able to enter a world like that without any knowledge of it, and the introduction to it is nice and smooth, and you don't feel like you're necessarily lacking anything. But the question that I was going to ask was about Feist's involvement in the process of the writing, and how much of it was he basically just overlooking it, and whatnot, and how much it was left up to you?
Well, so we kind of circle back around to what I had said before is about Ray talking. So Ray is very blunt and he's very direct, and so he was saying again, you can't afford to hire me to do this. You want to have my license, and so and he said, and even if that wasn't an issue, I'm currently on contract to finish my book King's Buccaneer, and so I'm tied up. I have deadline. I really don't have the time to mess with this. And so what happened is that John and I sat down very early in the process and came up with the main spine of the storyline, and we knew what was going to happen basically from the beginning to the end in terms of the big chapter, what's going to happen at the end of each chapter. And we sent that off to Ray, and Ray went over it and says, okay, this is good. What the hell are you thinking? You're an idiot. And he gave us very general kind of notes about stuff, but most of it was mainly about this does or does not fit into the way I see the universe, or my characters would not have behaved in this way. Of course, whenever we were working on this, we made the main focal characters in the game two characters that, Goreth and Owen, who are our tag team through the whole game. Ray didn't create them, so they don't have no pre-existing history, and so we can pretty much do whatever we wanted to with them. And everybody else is kind of an opportunity to kind of cameo. So now you're going to travel with Jimmy the Hand for a while, and here's LockDownCon, and here's Arutha, here's Pug, here's Gamina. So we try to structure it in such a way that we would have quite a bit of latitude. So the rest of it was just about making sure that, are we representing gods the way that they should, be seen in this universe, and magic and so on and forth. So it was a way of kind of letting Ray just kind of giving us, here are the two rails you need to stay between. But beyond that, you're kind of on your own. And for pretty much for the rest of the project, other than me occasionally pestering them with some particular Midi-chlorians Press, because Ray didn't even create this universe. It was created by his role-playing group, Midi-chlorians Press, and he wrote a book set in that setting. Right. So I would get an answer back from them, and that was sort of how the whole process went through the entirety of the game. And so Ray admitted at the end of everything that he said, I didn't really expect that you were going to be, that this is what the game was going to be. He says, I thought there were going to be little characters running around. They'd have their name over their head and it said, this is Arutha or this is Jimmy. And that would be about the extent that it has any connection to my books, or whether there would even be the kind of experience he was. And so he was actually pretty shocked at how devoted I had been to trying to bring Midi-chlorians, the one that people saw and understood in the books, that I brought that to life. And so that was pretty much the, Ray kind of answering questions and poking me with a stick every once in a while to correct me. But other than that, it was John and I driving the story on this particular bus.
Right. One aside to that, and then I want to get to Ilana.
Yes.
The Feist, I think it was about 5 years after the release of Betrayal at Krondor, Feist decided to incorporate that story into Krondor the Betrayal, and how much of the game is intact in that book? I mean, how much of it is really, how much did he change it or alter it, or was it pretty much
the main storyline is there? Of course, all the subquests, the subquests, and the save the cat stuff is obviously not in there for obvious reasons.
Sure.
Because it makes sense in a game, but it's like the kingdom is in peril, but we need to go over here and find out what's going on with so and so's love life.
Let's go down this well and.
Right. And so there's a lot of dumb stuff that you do in an RPG, and you say it's part of the gameplay. It's allowing the player to have agency and wander around and do things in their own time in their own order. But so that stuff is all gone.
Sure.
And he changed a few names or tweaked a few names here and there. I didn't, I sort of surprised him because I invented gunpowder in his universe, and apparently it doesn't work in Midkemia. But anyhow, but aside from a few things like that, as far as I know, it's stuck to the main narrative that we told in the game. Yeah,
I was just wondering how much of it of you saw and what you did you saw in the book. Basically.
Well, I'll just say this. Ray didn't tell me he was writing the book. My first discovery that this was happening is I was reading Locus, which is the industry magazine for science fiction and fantasy writers, and you find out about what books are being released, who's working on whatever, and editors, and so on and so forth. And so there's usually an area where they say, here are the books that have currently been sold or received from authors, and said, Ray Feist just made 7 figures for Krondor the Betrayal.
Oh, you're killing me.
And so he didn't call me. He didn't tell me this was going on. So that was my first idea this was going on. I would have liked a phone call or an email that said, "Hey, Neal, I'm doing this."
Right.
But I mean, Ray was very kind. He he dedicated the book to John and I, and he definitely gives us credit. And he says, they came up with the core of the story that you're about to read. So he did give us credit in the book, and I appreciated him doing that. But I kind of would have liked a heads up.
Sure.
But anyway, but yeah. So once we were kind of done with the game, we didn't really have that much interaction after that, and of course, conversely, whenever he was writing the subsequent sequels to that book, he took characters out of the game and he had them in his later books.
Right.
So anyway,
good. So we can talk about some of the mechanics of the thing soon, especially when we're talking with Damjan there, and also what happens after when you're finished the game. But moving on to Ilana, I don't know if you looked like you had something you wanted to respond to what you were just hearing, or you just.
I couldn't believe he found out about the book from Locust. Like I just had to live with that for a minute, but I overcame it. Besides,
there you go.
The dedication makes up for a lot, I think.
Yeah, it does. It does. And again, I guess it's part of, I don't know, the industry, whether it's the game industry or the book industry or whatever. But yeah,
I just do want to say for a second is the fact that Ray was very kind about allowing me to play in a sandbox.
Right.
And I am very privileged, and no one here would have any idea who the hell I am if it weren't for this game.
Right.
And so I owe Ray that in spades.
Yeah.
So I want to make that very clear.
Oh, sure.
And despite the fact that my feelings were kind of hurt about that whenever that happened, I'm still very, very grateful for the opportunity that I got to play there, and the fact that Ray said very nice things about what we did with the game and has done, and so I want to make that very clear. So I'm not bashing on Ray here.
No.
Right.
That
I
was
didn't think you were.
no. I thought that was very explicit. I thought it was very clear.
Yeah.
But for sure. But Ilana, I was going to say, so getting into writing and whatnot. Maybe you can just talk about how you, not just from this game, but in terms of your involvement with becoming a writer and your path.
Okay. Around the time that I was playing this game, I was also, believe it or not, even though I was a teenager, I was already getting serious about being a fantasy writer. I already knew that was what I wanted to do. And so everything that I read was always with an eye to, what can this teach me about writing? And I approached the game in the same way. And I had even started working on my first novel, when I was playing this game. Like, it was something I did in high school. I was writing a book longhand, and I did finish it. And it will never be published, but that's okay.
Yeah,
my first novel is the same. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that was my decision, actually. I never tried to submit it to anybody or anything. It was like, when I reached, the age of 18 or 19 or whatever, I was like, yeah, maybe not.
Yeah.
And then life happened, and, so it was technically my second novel that was published, which is something that I started when I was in college, sort of. Last Song Before Night, which is my first novel that, my published novel, that is, that was a process of 10 years from beginning to end. From inception to completion, about 10 years. That first novel grew into a trilogy. Now it's, the sequel is Fire Dance, and The Poet King is the book that came out this past month in paperback. But it was this was a dream that I was working towards, my whole life, even before I was an adult, which is not what everyone has to do. Don't get me wrong, but that's what I had to do.
Sure. Yeah, but you have to, and also you're finding yourself, and you're not, and there's uncertainty and all that. The biggest thing I find with any kind of adventure, whether it's in novels or gaming or anything, is first just deciding to do it, and actually convincing yourself, well, maybe I can, I can give it a shot. I can, and then you have to sort of find your way. And I imagine, for many people, it takes a while, these 10, 20 year overnight successes, or whatever.
Right.
This is not an easy road.
No.
I think, thank God, it doesn't matter how old we are, what we look like when we're writers, because it is a craft that takes, in most cases, for most people, takes many years to perfect. So, it's good we get some leeway. We're not like models or actors, who stop being relevant at a certain age. Like, we can just keep on.
Like me.
Likewise.
I didn't hear that.
Likewise.
What did you say, Neal?
No, I said like me.
Yeah. Or this.
All of us. I mean, it's something that comforts me.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, you do it. You do whatever you do out of the desire to do it, and not for any other reason necessarily. And like again, here I am. This I'm pushing. I always say I can throw a rock and hit 60, right? And here I am on Twitch playing video games on the internet. For in many cases for people half my age and whatever, but the point of it is I don't do it because of that or for any other reason other than the fact that I have a lifelong love of gaming, and this just sort of happens. Again, I don't know about you people, but I find that very much a lot of what happens in your life just occurs organically out of some circumstance that arises. And or even if it's just a matter of sitting down and putting a pen on a piece of paper and writing a few sentences and thinking, well, I could write some more sentences, and then maybe this can, and then suddenly somebody sees it or whatever, But anyway, that's my take. I don't know if you had anything else that you wanted to say. How about your influence? Say, for example, not just just to tie it back into Betrayal at Krondor, or actually, I've got another question about your writing itself. If you were to describe your what makes your books or your writing different or unique, or the thing that you would, if you had to explain to someone what your writing was about, not just from a plot point of view, but what is it about your writing that you think people would identify with? I know it's a hard question, but try to describe yourself as a writer. Yeah.
Of course, this is from my own subjective
Sure.
point of view. So my books have a lot of the familiar elements of fantasy. There's magic. There are enchantments. There are, poets who discover that their poetry actually has power in the world. So these are things that are not new ideas necessarily, but what I think I bring to the genre is a particular emphasis on character and the way the possibilities of fantasy, the possibilities that a storyteller gets when we have the option to have magic in our world, and create our own world. I like to tie together the possibilities of fantasy with the psychology of my characters and all that entails. And I like to really explore the depths of humans and what we feel and what we're capable of. So for me, whatever happens in my books, no matter how much flashbang kind of wizardry there is, it always in some way ties into character. And it's inherently psychological. And that's not something I see a lot, I don't think. So I think that's something I bring to the genre.
The fantasy aspect is the vehicle, but really the core of it all is basically about people.
Always.
And human stories, exactly. They just happen to be running around with swords or casting spells and whatever.
Well, I love that stuff.
Sure.
So.
Yeah, exactly.
And she does some really wonderful stuff. And so something that I've told her before is that, particularly as the series progresses, Fire Dance in the middle is actually my favorite book out of the trilogy. But Poet King is wonderful as well. Yeah. But if you like Guy Gavriel Kay's books, I think you will like Ilana's books because her storytelling is very emotional, and she gives her characters tough choices, and you hurt sometimes because you have to. So if I was in the same situation, I had to make some of the same agonizing decisions as these characters are, and that's something that I think that really drives her work. Is her stuff is very, it's very character driven. It isn't just like, here's this abstract plot. Right. And I'm just going to make all my characters go chase this.
Right.
It's coming out of a very deep kind of place or whatever. So I think that I would like to think that if Gorath's arc means something to you, then Ilana's books will mean something to you as well.
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah, it's not chasing after the big MacGuffin and the evil wizard who's at the top of the tower, which is not necessarily going to be a bad story. It's just that, well, we've been there, done that, and whatever. Or even in games, RPGs, an RPG, that's a broad topic of things, but you can boil a lot of it down, especially in the Tolkien style universe, all down to orcs and trolls and everything else. But at the core of it all, there's got to be story, and there's got to be ideas and character. So
exactly so.
Yeah. Damjan. Yay. We were talking about, well, actually, in respect to, first talk specifically about the game that you're working on, and then I want to talk a little bit about the process, and maybe Neal can have something to say, of course, on that too, in terms of working out game mechanics and whatnot within a story-based sort of thing. But tell us about Call of Saregnar. Again, I've played the demo of it. I've streamed it on my channel, and I think it's an amazing representation of a modern Betrayal at Krondor, so to speak. It's not Krondor, but actually, I was saying this to Neal earlier. It's not Krondor, but it sure feels like the same world. You're not in Krondor, you're somewhere else, but you feel at home. It feels just like... anyway, tell us about the game.
Yeah, so Call of Saregnar is a nod to the wonderful era of party-based RPGs from the 90s. Betrayal at Krondor, of course, it's the main inspiration behind it. That's why if you play the demo, you feel that it's got the same spirit as Betrayal at Krondor.
Absolutely.
It's got an intriguing story. It's got interesting characters, a unique low fantasy medieval setting. Got the graphics, which are charmingly old school, with the billboard trees and low poly 3D world. All of the textures I've taken, not all of them, but most of them I've taken them myself. Actually, photographs. I put them together and so on. So that's charming too, I think. And the characters, all the characters, like in Betrayal at Krondor, are actual photographs of people. you interact with them, you can see them in the world, you can fight with them, and so on. And speaking of fighting, the combat system is a turn-based system on a hex grid. So that's like Betrayal Krondor, which had a square-based grid. I just wanted to go to the extra dimension to add a bit more tactics in, so I used the hex grid, and I'm going to upgrade that system a little bit further than Betrayal Krondor, but not much. I like the simplicity and the complexity of Betrayal Krondor. You know, it at first glance it looks like a simple system, but it can get quite complex when you involve magic and positioning and all that stuff. Range attacks, close attacks.
Yeah. See, that's where I was going to say. That's where I think, in terms of the similarity to Betrayal Krondor or any game of its type, it can be very similar in a mechanical way, and you can change the mechanics. But ultimately, it's I think that what makes this game, same with Krondor or anything else, that's what makes it different from other games, is that it's really, ultimately comes down to the story. Like the mechanics are one thing, but the thing is, and you can take those and modernize them, but to be able to create the atmosphere of a world and then populate it with people that you care about and whatnot, and the story is just very rudimentary at the moment in the demo. But you can see where it can go. It's like this is it could be a launching pad to a very, very interesting journey.
Yeah, I wanted to start the story in a completely different way, not with a big impact, with a war or with a tragic or whatever. Just two friends wandering into that village and getting robbed and so on. And then the story in chapter 1 would escalate and go skyrocket till the end, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way I wanted to, because I wanted different.
Yeah.
I don't like the classic RPG storyline where your village gets trashed and your parents get killed
and nobody wants nobody necessarily wants a repeat necessarily of Krondor, so to speak. But at the same time, you want to have that familiarity. But
of course.
But then it's up to you to just develop the game how you see fit and make it the way you want. And still, you're being respectful. But it's you're not necessarily tied down to remaking Krondor. You're actually trying to recreate the experience more than the game.
It actually started as Betrayal Krondor, very close in the systems, except the story and the world and so on. In the systems and the looks, it started very close to Betrayal Krondor.
Right.
But since then, in the years I've been developing it,
I was going to ask you, how long? When did you start? Yeah. When did you start working on this?
Oh, it's got a very long history. But in the current incarnation, using the Unity engine, it must be around 3.5, maybe even 4 years now. That's working part-time on it.
But it's something that you've had in your mind for a long time.
Yeah, I had it in my mind of creating an RPG based on Betrayal Krondor since my teenage years.
Yeah,
which is
Well, so far it looks great.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think it boils down to the same. This is all coming back to story and character, which is really to me is what the foundation of everything about this is. Like, even in terms of Betrayal Krondor itself, if it didn't have the story, it would just be another game with some cool combat. But the people that are involved in the combat are what it's about.
The characters are everything. Yeah.
Yeah, big time, because that's what. Okay, you got the textures, you got the graphics right. Okay, and here's this little combat engine, but who are these people, and why should I even care about them? That's what it boils down to. But I'm very I'm trying to think of the good word for it. But no, I definitely expect a lot from this, and I don't mean that in a pressure way.
No pressure.
No. But I expect it naturally. Like I think it's in good hands. For sure. And the demo is available at callofsaregnar.com. You can download the demo
right now.
For the Patreons.
I'll be releasing a bigger demo in the end of this year. Yeah. That's the plan.
Yeah. It's perfect. And Neal, a bit about the I don't know how involved you were with the actual production of the game in terms of Krondor and its the game mechanics and how they all parts go together.
So of course, John and I kind of divvied things up, and of course, whenever we first got started, John was again kind of running the show, and he was coming up with a system and all this other stuff, and I was in my little hole kind of planning what was going to be happening with the story. And so, but the thing about it is a game like Krondor, and particularly if you played it, you'll see that the design and the story are really so intertwined that you can't really have them completely isolated. And so over time, John and I ended up kind of with doing a lot of, he's doing stuff in sort of my bailiwick and vice versa. And so I did a lot of the design for how resistances and weaknesses work for weapons and illnesses and that sort of stuff. And of course, all the design stuff that happened, it was John would come in and throw something at me, and I'd talk about it, because I was definitely more of a hardcore RPG guy than John.
Right.
And so I was, in addition to being the Feist consultant, I was the RPG consultant. So I go back and look at stuff. People talk to me all the time about the puzzle chests, because they say, well, they have puzzles and riddles and stuff, so that's you, right? And I said, well, actually, John is the one who created the Moorhead lock chests, and about 90% of those riddles were things that he wrote, not me. I'd love to take I'd love to take credit for that, because that's one of the mechanics that everybody who plays this game talks about, those freaking riddle chests. And the funny thing about it is that stories that I've heard from people who playing is they said that a guy would be playing the game and he'd get to one of the puzzle chests, and then he'd be kind of messing with it, and his girlfriend would come running in, and she'd want to be there to help him solve the riddle for the puzzles. And so it was kind of funny, because this seemed to be one of those things that, that conception that, the traditional market for RPGs was males 18 to 30 years old was the target market for not just for games, but movies and everything for just years and years and years. And so the same thing was true of games. And I think that we're still trailing most other industries in that respect, because, people have this conception, well, if you like beating people up and having wars and fighting everything, that's an exclusively male thing. But there were a lot of people who, of course, Dynamics was a subsidiary of Sierra. And even though we refer to it as an RPG, it is more of an adventure game with combat. Because there's a lot of the same kinds of, okay, well, here's this particular puzzle or this thing you have to solve, and so you're doing a lot of running around and figuring stuff out. The only difference is that you got a big ass fight in the middle of it. And so, but because we were a subsidiary of Sierra, a lot of our thinking was take Sierra's best adventure games and graft an RPG engine onto it. And so, but anyway, so John was the one who came up with the puzzle chests, the really funky way that our magic interface works. That was John's invention, because he'd actually had a game that he wanted to make before he got to Dynamics called Sorcery, which was going to be about music and magic and all this other kind of stuff. And so I can't remember all the details about it, but I think part of that interface actually came out of designs he had created for Sorcery.
That wacky trap system.
We had the magical traps and all other stuff, and so a lot of the game design stuff is primarily John, but I was the event design guy. Right. So you're going to run into this guy. This is what's going to happen. This is the stuff they're going to have. But John is the one that's figuring out. Okay, this is how it's going to explode. This is how things are going to work. So. Right. but so that was sort of our division of labor. Is
Right.
He did all and that, and of course, on top of all that, John was managing the project, and so he's taking managing the art department and the programmers and all this other stuff. Now, as the project wore on, and John was dealing more and more with stuff above our heads because our project was vastly over budget and behind schedule. And John was the one in the trenches fighting and saying, this is going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be worth it. And ultimately he's the one that defended us and made sure we got out the door. Because I know that people were getting antsy because I think our original budget was something like $600,000 or $700,000, and it was like $1.3 million by the time we got done, which in 1990s dollars, that was a crap load of money for a game. And you don't know how well it's going to sell. And so obviously, understandably, people were getting anxious. One
other thing I could add in there too. I think it was around the same time. I don't know if Ultima Underworld, because I think they came out before, right? Around the same time or whatever. So
because whenever we first got started, our aim was to be the first fully 3D game to come out of the door, because you had games like Might and Magic, which is what we call 2D and a half. It's not really in a 3-dimensional space, but the way it's set up, it kind of looks like 3D. But what we did for for Betrayal at Krondor is we took their Aces of the Pacific flight simulator and we put it on the ground. And then we had to modify all the code because there's all kinds of things that you don't want to happen in a flight simulator that we had to deal with on a something you want to happen with the airplane. Right. So there's all kinds of stuff that, and of course, over time it got heavily tweaked, and I couldn't say how much of that original code got changed, because that's, that's programmers and doing black magic and sorcery, and I don't need to know what's going on over there. But we were hoping to be the first 3D game, and Ultima, whenever Ultima Underworld came out, I remember the week that it came out, and all of us standing around and collectively cursing.
Yeah.
Because those bastards beat us out the door. And but at the flip side of the coin is, I'm certainly glad we didn't rush Krondor to get it done, because it is the game that it is because we bled sweat, sweat and tears. I went into the hospital near the end of production simply because I had been working for 3 months, about 7 days a week, 18 hours a day.
Yeah.
And
crazy.
So even though I was 23 years old or whatever I was at the time, the human body is just isn't designed to do that.
Nope.
And so, whenever I tell people that I damn near gave my life for this game, I'm not lying. It was literally true. But again, I think the reason that the game is the way it is because we put 110,000% into it.
Yep.
And I think that it would be difficult to recapture that in a bottle again.
Yep.
I'm too old to try to do that again.
That's why Damjan is here.
That's why Damjan is here, so he can do the thing that I can't do anymore.
Yeah, the reason why I bring up Ultima Underworld is not necessarily to compare the two, because they're two different types of games and whatnot. But it must have had sort of like a thought of, look at what these people are doing, and this is what we're trying to do, and we're still trying to finish it, and we still have to convince the hires up that our game doesn't have that engine and it doesn't have all of that. But you stay the course anyway, and are hopeful that it's all going to come through. And in my mind, it came through in spades. Definitely.
Yeah. And they had the advantage of having a purpose-built engine. We had the advantage of starting off as, well, we already had good 3D tech, but we had to adapt it to make it work for what we wanted to do. And of course, I was constantly coming in the door and saying, here's other ways that I want to pervert what you're doing. But I had wizards working on our team. Our programming staff were wonderful, fantastic, amazing people, and they almost never said no to me which is a privilege I have not had since.
Yeah. One of the things I always I always say about Betrayal at Krondor is if you take all of the elements and the fact of how well they are welded together into this seamless game, and that's a tribute to everyone who worked on it. Just the fact of just the walking around engine, just the engine where you're walking down the street, they're walking down the roads or whatever, and then the overhead maps and the wonderful inventory system, the magic system, all of it. And every one of them are somewhat unusual. There's nothing really you can compare other things to. And it was almost like take these very disparate sort of elements, but somehow crammed them together into a completely cohesive, like totally solid game, So clap, clap, clap. So that's what Damjan's got to get at. You see, he's got to do the same thing. But how many people do you have working with you on this now? I mean, it's not just you now, but you certainly don't have like hundreds of like big companies behind you doing this. Like how many people do you have that are involved with the production of this game now, outside of just yourself?
It's a huge team.
Yeah, it's a huge team, thousands of people over the whole world.
Yes.
No, actually, just me.
Yep.
Doing everything except music and sound effects.
Yep.
I got Tony Macedonia from the US.
Mm-hmm.
He's a musician, composer, really talented guy.
Mm-hmm.
His music is top notch. I'm so happy to have met him. Then I got Ben from Germany. He's also really talented guy with sound effects. He's a nut with microphones and effects. So yeah, I got a really nice team together.
Well,
but overall, it's me doing all the work.
Amazing.
Yeah, programming, designing, graphics, modeling.
Yeah,
that stuff.
Yeah,
if I was 20 years younger, I'd be trying to do what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I feel old myself.
Well, hey, wait till you're done. But who knows? But we'll see where it goes. Let's see, what else was I going to say there? So outside of so you're like Ilana, you're still playing Betrayal at Krondor on occasion. You still play it on occasion, right?
Yeah. What can I say? I went through a time when I wasn't playing these games anymore.
Right.
Life happened a lot.
Sure.
And also these games stopped working on our computers. So there wasn't even a temptation. It was like, forget it, so. But then when, you call it GOG?
GOG, yeah.
Okay, I always was calling it GOG.
Well, originally, just to clarify, originally it was GOG, and then they decided, because it was great old games, but now they also do new games and everything, so they decided, well, let's just call it GOG then, because then it doesn't just imply that we only have all these old chestnuts like this,
And they have their competitor company, Magog, right?
Magog, right.
Right. Yeah, at a certain point, like, it started to become possible to play these games again.
Yeah.
And I was always talking to my husband about these games, and he was like, well, why don't you just show it to me? And I was like, oh, you're not going to like it, whatever. I was so used to, like, when I was growing up, it was like a nerdy thing to play these games. I was like, you don't have to see my nerdy side. It's okay. And he's like, no, I want to see. So, like, we started playing these games. And I think we might have even started with Krondor. And it was just a huge hit. He loved it. And it turned out to be a really fun way to hang out on the weekend, was to play the game together. And actually, we revisited it when lockdown started. I think it was even like last March. I was like, just really depressed. Like, oh my God, my husband already knew that it was going to be a year. Somehow he just knew. And I was like, this can't be happening. Can we just play Krondor? And it was really a big help, actually. It's very comforting.
No, for sure. I was going to say, one of the things that I'm of course going to be starting another playthrough of this later on. And you might be interested to know that I'm actually playing it on a Pentium 233. So I've taken the GOG version, I've transported it over to that, so I'm playing it on, and it's not even, and actually a Pentium 233 didn't even exist in 1993. I mean, it was I think you could play it on a 386, I think.
I never had a Pentium. Yeah. My family, we went from having an XT that didn't play anything to a 486.
Yeah. Well, I I have to run Mo slow to get it to run on this because it would go too fast, and the MIDI would mess up. Yeah. So, but it plays very nice. So, but anyway, but yeah, that's one of the advantages of GOG, of course, is that we bring a lot of these old games back to life so that people can play them on whatever machine they have. You know.
Yeah, do a good job.
You're talking about MIDI, and I do just want to drop something in here because we've been talking about story and we're talking about mechanics, but there is a third leg to this equation.
Yep.
That I think is huge, particularly for everyone that I know who's ever played this game, and it's about that soundtrack.
Absolutely, 100%.
And what Jan Moorhead did for that soundtrack was phenomenal, and amazing what he was doing with an MT32.
Yeah.
And of course, we later on we had the CD. The release of the CD of the soundtrack on sound, and he spiced it up and changed things a little around for the CD arrangement.
Yeah.
But he did a phenomenal job with that. And I just have a bit of sad news is that I just found out a couple of weeks ago, whenever we were doing a Twitch sort of like this with our friends over at Nerd Grits.
Right.
And we found out that day that from another friend who'd been trying to reach out to Jan because I wanted to have him come and participate with us and talk about this.
Right.
And unfortunately, we found it from his wife that he actually passed back in August.
Wow.
And I don't know if it was COVID related or whatever. Because Jan was older. Was older than I was, and so I was very sorry to hear that he had passed. But he's beyond just so there was the gameplay, there was the story, and the music was the third piece of that puzzle that I think made Betrayal at Krondor so successful.
Yeah, I agree.
It's true.
And being a musician myself, I would be remiss to even. I was one of the things actually that I was thinking when you were talking about the mortal word chests is when that music starts.
Yep.
Before you even see the chest and you hear the music start, the chill. It's like, oh, excellent. And so it's like, okay, it's one of these word chest things, great. But the music itself just sets up the mood of it, and it could play, and you could sit there for however long it takes for you to try and solve the puzzle, and just let that music just loop and loop and loop. All of the music, the tavern music, the of course the intro, every little every single bit of music in that thing is part and parcel of the whole thing.
It gets repetitive. Never.
No, it just loops like a dream, basically.
Jan and I had, I was very, very pleased because I'm a musician myself, but I'm more of a composer than an actual someone that can play stuff because my hand-eye coordination sucks. So imagine being a game designer with bad hand-eye coordination. That really is not convenient. Which is one of the reasons why I'm not big on arcade games. And I like role-playing games that have the pause time.
Yeah. Turn-based, yeah.
But turn-based or pause time like Baldur's Gate. But anyway, so I'm a musician myself, and so Jan and I had a lot of conversations about stuff, and I was very, very pleased that he gave me as much access as he did to, give me your ideas about what you're going to do on this, we're going to do here or whatever. And the nicest thing that he had to say to me about stuff, he said, I really like working with you because most of the time, he said, and we have combat music. Well, what are you looking for in terms of the theme or the sound or what have you? And most people would just give him combat music.
Yep.
And he said, he told me a story about whenever he was working for an ad agency. And he said it was very frustrating because he was writing music for advertising, and people would come in and say to him things like, well, imagine you're driving down the road in your car, the wind's blowing through your hair and all this other stuff. And you reach over and you turn on the radio and you hear a song that makes you want to buy a fax machine.
Yeah.
Well, now that's a fantasy that even I.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, but he said usually that's the kind of direction I get from people, and so I really enjoyed working with Jan. He was a really great guy.
That makes me want to ask you a question, Neal.
No,
because I'm really passionate about what music brings to a game. I really think it's really key. So, yes. And I've always been curious about how designers were involved. So I really would love a specific example from you, the kind of thing you would have said to him. Don't kill me. I'm just curious.
Well, no. What I would probably say, okay, well, we're in, we're going to go into this particular area. And so what I've got in mind is we start off with a trumpet fanfare, and then have some strings. But it's really important. We're dealing with Owen's interior conflict here. I mean, and we'd be talking about this crazy abstract crap that it's impossible to actually reach. But we talking about because, as a musician, as someone that was trained in film and all this other stuff, I understand how important music is it's the other half of the equation, because the music is about the interior life of the character. Mm-hmm. Music are the things that are not said. It's about the emotion that's underneath. Yep. And so you have to communicate with your musician and say, they're worried, they're stressed about, this confrontation. Otherwise it might seem like a pleasant conversation, but he's lying to this other person. And so we want to have kind of a sense of an undertone of tension or stress that's going on. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes I might have a notion of what instruments that I had in mind for it, or it would just be a matter of, I'd hum something really terrible, and then Jan would say, okay, well, I'll try to do something with that. And then he'd do something amazing. But the only song in which I can claim is at least partial credit for was Northward and Pigs.
Did you sing that?
Because I wrote the lyrics to that, and I kind of hinted what I thought, and so he took that and adapted into the song that you know and love. But yes, so that's my musical credit on Krondor. But like I say, that's really all Jan. But
lovely.
But anyway,
well, the one thing that I always think about, whether it's game music or soundtrack music or whatever, is that the music itself is not the emotion. It's the music suggests and brings out the emotion in the scene of whatever it is, and that's the key to it. Because if you're going to make a sad scene and you make sad music, well, no. That you don't have to make, it's got to apply to whatever is happening and whatever the scenes are. The other thing as well is that I find is if it stands out too much, and that's the amazing thing I think about this particular soundtrack, is that the music is going through your head and you're humming along with it as you're playing through it. But again, you never get tired of it because it just sort of settles into the back of your mind, and then you're just focused on the game. But meanwhile, the soundtrack is playing. You know what I mean? It doesn't take you and say, "Hey, listen to me,"
He's one of the few people I know that have accomplished something where he somehow managed to take melodic music and not have it be repetitive.
Yep.
And that's really, really hard, because most game soundtracks just go for ambient.
Yeah.
Because you can't really pick out a melody or whatever. It's just tones.
Right.
And so, like I say, he managed to kind of latch on and figure out a way to give a memorable theme, mm-hmm. and to something that you can definitely pick out a melody to, but for whatever reason you never got sick of hearing it.
Yeah.
And so that was Sorcery.
And it's an epic soundtrack.
Absolutely. And Owen trying to play the various different versions of the tune. Dun, dun, blink, blink, blink. Oh, it's great. It's great to hear him evolve as a lutist.
That's a great detail.
Yeah, beautiful. Geez, what else was there? I know I've been looking over at chat. Yeah, this is sad. Be sad. Exactly, Darksaber. I don't know if anybody in chat has anything that they wanted specifically to ask. I've been sort of neglecting my duties of observing chat too much. What is an RPG without looting? Yes. Well, looting,
yes.
Well, that was actually something that I only thought about as an adult playing this game.
Mm-hmm.
It made me laugh a little bit. I was like, this is amazing. Like, we're like just going into houses.
Yep.
When we knock at the door and they won't let us in, they're like, come on, let us in. I'm like, wow, these guys really have a sense of entitlement, around here.
Oh, okay.
It's very amusing.
I could oh sorry, I just saw a question here, and I actually could give this to Ilana as well. Just wondering, how did Neal learn to write?
So I was abducted as a child and held. No. So my process of learning to write, I didn't suck it out of my thumb, as some people might say. As the expression goes, I come from a family of storytellers. Now, most of them have not been written storytellers. They're all oral storytellers, and my uncles would sit around and tell these stories, and most of them were just these horrendous, outrageous lies, but you didn't care because they were so good at telling you these things. And so it's also kind of a Southern thing, that in the South, you'll have two people having a conversation, and one person, they're talking about an experience that they have in common, or about something that both of them know about. One of them will be lying their ass off about what happened, and the other person is nodding their head and listening along because they prefer the good story over what really happened. And I think this also, we kind of inherit this from the Irish a little bit too. But I come sort of out of that tradition of fabulous liars who will tell you wonderful, enchanting stories, and you just stick with it just because it's an interesting story. So I had that sort of as my roots of listening to people. My parents and my brother were both my parents were school teachers, and so education was very, very important to them. And I don't allow my accent to come out very much, but every once in a while when I talk to somebody back home, some of this will come out. My wife refers this to me as going home.
I'm the same way, buddy. Same thing happens to me.
But I'm originally from Tulsa, Oklahoma. But my mom fought ferociously to keep me from having an accent because she was afraid I was going to sound like a hick. And of course, when I worked in radio for a while, that also helped, pare out some of that accent. But my parents read. I never went to bed without a bedtime story. My mom or my dad or my brother would all take in turns, and they would read me stories before I went to bed. Also, I was severely asthmatic as a child. I mean, go out on the playground, run around for 10 minutes, have an asthma attack, be stuck in bed for a week. Under a humidifier. And so when that's your world, well, we didn't have a TV in my bedroom because that wasn't the culture back then. Kids don't have televisions in their own rooms. There would be a television in the family room, and that's where it lived. And so you're stuck in your bedroom. Well, what do you have to do? I have books. I have piles and stacks of books. And so as a child, I read voraciously. And when I was in elementary school, I don't know if they still do this, but there used to be so-and-so read 25 books, this semester, or they read 50. I always maxed out whatever the certificates they gave away. So reading, I knew from very on how much I was very in love with storytelling. And by the time I got to junior high, my ninth grade teacher, we was just a regular day in class or whatever, and we'd written some essays and stuff. And so we're getting done with the class, and she said, "Neal, I need to see you after class." I went, "Oh shit. What did I do?" And so everybody leaves or whatever, and I'm sitting on this little stool next to her desk, and she says, I need to tell you right now is I know what you're going to be. You are really destined to be a writer. I want you, when you're going to be thinking next year about the classes you're going to take up at the high school and everything else, I want you to be considering the stuff you need to take this task, because I really think this is what you need to do. You have a great imagination. You write well. I think this is what you need to pursue, which when you're 9 years old, that's a little shocking. To have a teacher tell you something like that, but I followed her advice. And so I got myself into the typing class so that I could get into the journalism. And so I was in high school journalism. I did a lot of other stuff. And once again, I had another lady who was driving my life there. My journalism advisor was amazing. Her name was Mrs. Schaub, but everybody calls her Mom Schaub because that's the way she treated everybody. We were her kids. And so whenever I became the editor for the school magazine, she would I'd be turning in my articles for stuff, and she was sending off the stuff I wrote to state competitions, and I'd get this notice that, yeah, you won this competition. Go, I didn't enter any competition. She says, well, I did. And so I all along I had other people who spotted this for me before I even knew it myself. But again, it's just I loved storytelling when I was growing up. So I went to the University of Oklahoma and took my degree in radio, television, and film production. But I grew up in Oklahoma. I didn't think I had any connections to Hollywood, which meant I wasn't going to get to Hollywood. So I spent most of my time in radio production, but I was working radio news. So again, writing every day. You know, I had news stories that were due, worked as a news intern for OU's radio station there. And then along the way, I also wrote these crazy radio dramas called Uncharted Regions. And it was the scripts that I wrote for Uncharted Regions that got me the job at New World whenever I applied. And then also in college, I took several semesters of novel writing. You know, Ilana was talking to you about her first novel that will never see the light of day. I have one of those too. You will never see it. It was terrible. But the thing about it is it taught me about how to write. I had an unusual writing circle too, because I was in a class with primarily ladies in their 50s, 60s, and 70s who were primarily writing historical romances. They didn't know nothing about science fiction or fantasy. What kind of weirdo pervert are you that you're writing this stuff? And you're only like 17 or 18 years old. You're nuts. But they gave me lovely feedback on stuff. Nice. And it left me with a permanent respect for romance writers, because these people are churning out novel after novel after novel. How do you keep this interesting? How do you keep up the tension? And so it was about conflict between characters, and not about what's the big wizard doing over here. And so it gave me a special understanding of novel writers spend their time worrying about personal relationships. You create the tension just with that, and not that there's a ticking atomic bomb over here. And granted, that occasionally happened. You've got the other big kind of plot that's going on. But it's kind of funny because I was trained by romance writers. And so that's actually before I got into the games, that's where I learned how to write prose and write fiction.
It's craft, right?
It's craft. Absolutely, it's about craft. Yeah.
That reminds me of course, the story of Stephen King and his wife pulling Carrie out of the garbage. Basically, that he'd thrown it away. He was probably drunk at the time. Who knows? But anyway, well, he probably was. If you ever read On Writing, which is Stephen King On Writing, is the best book he ever wrote, in my humble opinion. But anyway, Ilana, it's a good question for you as well. Basically, how you started writing and how it all came to be. What was your start?
When I think back, I always loved making things. So even before I learned how to read, I would draw. And then, as soon as I learned how to read, basically, and I read my first book that wasn't a picture book, I was like, I want to make one of these. Of course, I had no idea, what was coming. I didn't know anything about publishing. It just seemed like a good idea at the time. But, the more I read, the more I fell in love with the medium. And I adopted a view, especially as a teenager, when I became more consciously ambitious. I adopted a view that everything I read, I would analyze it to figure out what it could teach me. What did this do that I loved? What did this do that I thought wasn't very good? And why? Later on in college, I had a poetry teacher who had a way of putting it that I really liked. She had us read poems, and write about what in the poem we wanted to steal. So I'd actually been doing that for years before that with novels. I'd look at this novel and be like, what do I want to steal? Not in terms of ideas, not in terms of plagiarism, in terms of, how did this writer make this scene so poignant without having any over the top emotion? How do I steal that technique? That's awesome.
John Martin, songwriter. I remember once someone asked him how he comes up with songs, and he says, "Well, I play songs that I know, and I just play them over and over until I don't recognize the song that I'm playing." And basically, it's big hits or things that everyone's influenced by something, And the thing is, you're going to steal whether you want to or not, but it's how you take it in and regurgitate it, basically, in your own way.
Well, everyone we read, as an author, everyone I read is potentially a teacher. Sometimes they're teaching me what not to do.
Right.
But it's always a learning experience. That's how I approach everything I read. And I don't want to make it sound really pedagogical or something. I enjoy it. It's where the juice is for me. So, I take a lot of pleasure in reading, and I also always thinking about what I can take from, it's always such a joy to discover something that is so amazing that I have to figure out how it works.
It reminds me of, when there are many people who, talk about when they were doing literature or whatever in school, and they had to read certain books, and they had to write book reports on it. And so many people who hated it. And I got to think that the majority of people who didn't hate it are writers. Yeah. Because they would do the same thing and tear the thing apart into pieces,
Oh, when Amazon came into existence, because yes, I'm that old, I remember being so excited about writing reviews because I had things to say, and I wanted to read other people's reviews to see what they thought of books. And that was actually not what I had hoped for. It was more, reviews tended to be like 2 stars. This was lame. But, I was always looking for some kind of exchange of ideas about books. And I always, I loved writing reviews that delved into what I thought was important in a particular book. So I was a nerd who was happy to write book reports.
Yeah, sure.
I think it's about finding the thing that you love. I mean, that, a lot of people, it's about how could I tear this person down. I don't tend to be interested in those kinds of reviews because there's no point in it. First of all, there has been a writer, whether they're a good writer or they're an awful writer, they spent a lot of time doing this. They're trying to make money and make a living. Why am I going to get in there and piss on that? I'm much more interested in writing a book that says this is a book or a game or a movie or whatever that you should go buy. You should go spend time with this or whatever because you're going to have a good time. And so I don't tend to write a lot of reviews, but whenever I do, that's what I try to do. But again, whenever I'm looking at a book or a movie or whatever, I'm not looking for something to hate. I'm looking at something that I'm looking for joy. I'm looking for a connection to something. And so I'm always looking for the next great read, the next great watch, the next great play. But it is important, and as Ilana was saying, is I learn just as much stuff from great writers as I do from really crappy ones.
Sure.
Because every once in a while, if I'm reading, if I'm feeling depressed and go, oh crap, I'm having imposter, syndrome at the moment. How the hell? Why is anybody listening to me? I mean, why are there 211 people in this room right now? But then I'll go find a novel that it's just total trash, and I'll read it and go, okay, they got published. Someone paid them to do this or whatever. So that's inspirational for me. But and granted, we all have different ideas about what's good and what's dreck. So that's different.
And there are a lot of successful people who do dreck, and there's lots of very talented people who do nothing.
Yes, exactly right.
I'm not as nice as Neal.
She's so mean. You can tell in this interview. She's just
vicious,
terrible.
Well, I see value in criticism. I feel that in order to have light, you have to have dark. In order to understand what's good, you have to understand what's not. And so I do see value in writing about books in a way that's not always very complimentary. I see not in like the kind of Goodreads, blah blah blah. This author is stupid, kind of, personal attack nonsense. But I'm talking more like really getting into the nuts and bolts of like what's going on here, and what went wrong.
Yeah.
I see value in that.
Sure.
From the point of view of literary criticism, obviously, if you're an author, it's better to not read the books like the reviews like that about your own work. That's my recommendation. But I think that it's important that critical reviews do exist. Ideally, you hope that the person who writes a review of the book is engaging with it in a way that they actually are trying to understand what you did. And whatever criticism they have is from the point of view of did this succeed or not. That's the ideal anyway. I actually have an alter ego under my given name, where I have written many book reviews over the years for different publications. And once in a while I still do that. But now that I am an author, I feel like it's because for me to start backstabbing my peers would not be cool.
Yeah. It makes editors and other people unhappy with you too. So yeah.
I didn't even think of that. I just feel like not where I belong anymore. But I still do enjoy exercising my critical faculty, and I do at the times.
Sure. So I wanted to direct something to Damjan, or whatever. So we've all been chatting about story and all this other stuff, and say, so if you wanted to talk about process, and also you want to talk about, who else is influencing you, or the way that the stories of the authors or the games and stuff that are kind of inspiring you from, at least from a story slant.
You read my mind, Neal. It's exactly what I was going to ask you.
My inspirations are 95% Raymond Feist.
Wow.
Of course, you, because Betrayal, Krondor. I don't consider, whatever. That's really the big inspiration. I read other authors, other books, but I'm really since I'm doing a Betrayal Krondor spin-off, let's say, I wanted to have that same voice, that same tone in the story. So
this is not
a bit of Feist's writing style, I guess.
This is not necessarily specifically by choice, maybe as other just the fact that you're so involved with.
I think it's both a choice and what I grew up with. I grew up reading Feist. I read all of his books, and that's a big influence on me.
Sure. What about from a gaming standpoint? Like either games or, your methodology in terms of what you do. Where did you learn your trade of programming even itself, or other games that have influenced you beyond just that?
I mean, it's all the classics of the 90s. I don't really like the hardcore RPGs. I like more the story-based RPGs and the adventure games of the 90s and so on. My journey to be able finally to work on this game is quite a long story of being a web developer and application programmer and so on. There's really a lot of stuff you need to learn before you can go into something so massive. Everybody tells you that you never should go. Your first project should be a really small game. I mean, I made a couple of small demos and stuff, but I consider this my first project, really. And jumping into an RPG as a first project is a big thing. That's why I spent. That's why I spent many decade or two learning all the stuff that I can finally put my whole into it. So that was a long journey.
Yeah.
RPGs are the deep end of the pond.
At least I'm not doing huge branching storyline. It's pretty linear, and I'm not doing really complex systems. I'm keeping it low RPG, a bit more of an adventure style game than an RPG. Let's say it's got RPG elements like Krondor had, but it's also got really a lot of narration and characters and so on.
But it's like you have in basing it in Krondor from just from a love of the game and all that, is you've got a really again a very solid sort of basis to sort of to branch from, and even just like the demo itself shows that too. I mean, you've got a lot of core elements there that you still need to develop, but the thing is the fundamental basis of the game is there. So now it's the matter of embellishing it, building on it, and then growing it, and that'll take however long it takes. But you've got a solid foundation.
It's still missing some systems, like how do you learn magic? I've got a whole a lot in that in store because it's not developed in the demo. You just have a couple of spells and that's it. But
that was one thing I think I remember reading that Feist actually in his books he didn't really get into the magic specifics a lot either. I mean, there were spells and stuff, but there was no real development of the idea of what the magic was.
Yep. Well, it's kind of interesting because as I had mentioned before, is the world that Ray writes his books in was created by his gaming group Midi-chlorians Press, and so whenever everything was going on, he said, "Hey, can I write the story out here in the corner of this little duchy of Krondor that's way the hell away from all this other stuff? And also, I'm going to set it 800 years before the events of your role-playing session. So I'm not really treading on the mythology you've created here. It's the same universe and everything else, and same gods and that kind of stuff. But he has his little council of wizards over there who, and again, I got to consult with them whenever we were working on Betrayal at Krondor, just on points of lore. Who is this god? Why do they do whatever? And so, but Ray, I think Ray was trying not to just get too down into the nerd mud with all that stuff. I think he was looking for, because whenever you're in we all look back at Lord of the Rings. Well, hell, we don't understand any of the magic that happens in that. There's no system at all. And Ilana and I have discussed this on panels together about magic. There's a certain degree of, I want magic to be magic, because if I get too specific about it, it turns into science and it loses a little bit of the sort of the magic of the magic. Those
damn Midi-chlorians.
No. Don't get me started.
Prequels.
The force is the force, and it doesn't need a scientific.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's difficult to put a magic system into a game and not
well, in a game it's different.
Exactly, in a game it is different.
Magic, right? Make it a game. I'm still trying to have. I mean, I have magic. I still try to have some of the magic in the magic. I'll try not to expose too much it outside of the player as a mechanic. Like icons. This spell. This is this spell. So I'm having this seemingly complex system in the background that exposes a lot of the lore, and it's not really that systematic like in most of the RPGs out there.
And even with Krondor, I try to remystify what we did with because I will say is before me, most of the spells were Plague of Flies, Fireball, Ice Block. You look at the names of spells and stuff, and they're just so. I hated that, and so that's why all of the spell names have these kind of poetic names.
Absolutely,
And Betrayal.
That's the best. Yeah.
Despair their eyes and
Despair thy eyes and Grief of 1,000 Nights.
Yeah, Scent of Sarek.
And so that was really important for me to kind of put the magic back into the magic, because we have a machinery about it, but you still want this notion of a guy sitting down with a spell, and this is this sort of arcane, but it's also kind of poetic.
Yeah.
And so
he's got to learn it, but he's got to have a gift to be able to learn it.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's a couple of other things. I'm not sure how long we want to go on here. We're actually going longer than an hour and a half, but that's fine. There was a couple of things we want to touch on. One was the Thief of Dreams, because now that exactly. Now that was going to be the sequel, wasn't it?
Yes. So,
and I think Feist was involved in that too, to some degree.
Yes. Yeah. So whenever we got done with with Krondor, it was taken pretty much as a given that we were going to do a sequel. One of the things that we kind of encountered, however, though, is that whenever John and I had done the research, because anytime that you're making something as a commercial product, you're required to when you take this to the bean counters, to say here are the other games that are out there that are currently successful, and this is the same space that it's going to live in, and these are the reasons why we think it's going to be successful, blah blah yada yada. And so so before we even did much with Krondor, the first 2 weeks was John and I obsessively playing all these other RPGs and writing up reports on them, and looking at here's what the kind of sales they had, here's their market, blah 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 blah. And of course, this was bearskins and stone knives back in the day. We didn't have the kind of analytics stuff that you have available now. Because now, when you play a game, it's streaming information back to the company, and it's telling you, okay, how many people get to this point by this amount of time? How many people buy this potion at this price? I mean, everything that you're doing in computer games today, that information goes back to them, and they can see what you're buying, how your game patterns. They know everything in detail about stuff. Yes, we're spying on you, Ilana. I'm sorry. I hate to tell you this, but the idea is to say that we can see basically how players are playing, and we can say, here's the stuff they like doing, so let's do more of that and spend less time wasting money on stuff that they don't like. Now, the end result of that is that people complain about games are all the same. They all whatever. He goes, well, we're looking at your behavior. There's what you tell us, and here's what you actually do when you're playing games. Here are the games you say you want. Here are the ones you're actually buying. So, and unfortunately, that's in whenever you're dealing with projects that cost $30, $50, $100 million to produce, it's almost impossible to make a quirky, independent little game that's going to make a lot of money. Yeah, they're going to go for the safe money, and that comes by aggregating behavior of thousands and thousands of millions of players, seeing what they're doing, and say, this is what they like. Here are the sort of keywords. Make a game that fits inside this box.
If people didn't like it, they wouldn't buy it.
Yeah, they're right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but that's the way the industry is now. But whenever John and I were doing it, like I said, we were reading we're playing all these other games and getting an idea of the stuff that's out there. So how did I actually start this conversation?
I was talking about Thief of Dreams. Thief
of Dreams. Okay. Yeah. So John and I had done all this research and said, okay, we are owned by an adventure game company, and adventure games have they will sell like gangbusters for the first 6 months, 8 months, whatever. They'll go off the charts and it'll go up, and then it drops back off, and the game is done for the most part. There'll still be a handful of people that are out there buying it, but the game audience, the people who are out there buying this stuff, this is the way it sells. It said, do not expect that from Betrayal at Krondor. What we've seen with role-playing games is they'll have a really sharp spike at first, then it'll drop off, but then it sells steadily for the next 2 or 3 years at kind of a continuous level. And so you're not getting this as dramatic a number necessarily at that spike, and it's going to drop off the same way the adventure games does, but it doesn't bottom out. It goes off and it kind of hits a steady and it just keeps on going. And we told them this is what it's going to do. We said on paper, this is what is going to happen. Yeah. So we pushed Krondor out the door. It did exactly what we predicted it was going to do. They saw the drop off, said, "Oh well, it's done because it's like our other games. We're canceling, the sequel that you're working on, which was called The Thief of Dreams."
Right.
Now, at that point, we had already been in production for 4 or 5 months. I can't remember exactly. But
now this was before the CD release, right?
This was before the CD release.
Yeah. Because there was a spike.
And so yeah. But whenever I'd written up the storyline for it, I honestly, as much as people like Betrayal at Krondor, you would have lost your mind over Thief of Dreams. That's just what I'm going to say. Thief of Dreams is the best thing that I ever wrote for the computer gaming industry, and probably one of the best things I ever wrote, full stop. anywhere. And so I gave the storyline to Ray. Of course, Ray was done with King's Buccaneer. It shipped and it was out doing stuff. And of course, he was promoting the game. I met with Ray. They flew me down to San Francisco to meet with Ray because Worldcon was going on in San Francisco. So I got to go down and have a meeting with Ray. And we sat at lunch, and we had a chance to read over the story, and we were going to have a story consult. And he just looked me straight in the face. He says, "If for some reason this game never gets made, I'm writing as a book. I'm gonna adapt Thief of Dreams. I think this is this good." He said, "This is really excellent."
Yeah.
So anyhow, part of the tragedy of what happened. There are numerous reasons. So there was the sales thing that happened. Because we'd gone over budget on Betrayal at Krondor, they were determined that they wanted to make the sequel for about half the budget and a third of the time that we had done the first one. And my take on it and John's take on it was this would be a complete slap in the face to all of the players who love the first game. There's no we give them this gigantic epic experience, and then we're going to follow them up with this little tiny ass game where they wanted us to reuse most of the assets. So same castle, same monsters, whatever. We just give them a different circumstance with all this other stuff. And he says we need to make it epic. We need to go to exotic lands. We need to do all this other stuff. So the plan was we were going to end up in Great Kesh for this other story. And so they were seeing a game that was going to be probably as much money, possibly even more than the first one. So that was the second thing that didn't make them happy, because again, they're looking at that bottom line of the money that had been made up to that point, and it's the selling characteristic. And the third thing is they said, we want every single line of text in this game to be performed by a voice actor.
Right.
And of course, we're looking at this as, do you know how much text is in this game? I mean, have you sat down and read it? I'll tell you right now, because I did this research whenever we finished Betrayal at Krondor. I did a word count, and we had more words in Betrayal at Krondor than Ray's longest novel. And you're talking about going and getting screen actors, putting them in a recording booth, paying the recording studio. Says you're going to pay as much just for the recording session as you did for the entire last game. That's not practical or pragmatic. He says, do you want to release an audio drama? Because that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be gigantic. We cannot afford, because he says we have to make the choice of either recording lines or cutting even more material out of the game. So they were not happy about any of this stuff. And so John and I were coming down trying to figure out, okay, could we do anything with the story that I created? Could we cut out levels? Could we do stuff? And so we had one plan, which meant a real butchery of what we were working on. Another idea that John and I got really kind of playing with the idea of is that let's go out and be really daring and say, we'll build this gigantic game that we really wanted to do, but we're going to release it episodically. We're going to release chapter 1, and then we'll do chapter 2 and chapter 3. But instead of waiting 18 months in order to do that, we'll be able to release these every 6 months or 8 months or whatever it was going to be, and release a game that way. And I think they were kind of intrigued by that idea. But the problem was that had never been done before. And number 2 is there is a perception issue of you release this big epic thing, but now we're getting this in little dribs and drabs. And there was the concern that this is going to be a bargain. That people are going to look at this as a bargain bin game. Well, Betrayal at Krondor, retailed for $49.50 or whatever, where it was, it was $40 or $50 back in the day. And so they're going to come along and they're going to see this game, and it goes, well, it only costs $10. Probably not very good. I mean, why would they be charging such a low amount of? I mean, there's a perceptual thing of it can't be good because you're not spending very much on it. Mm-hmm. And of course, we were arguing, says we might have the opportunity to actually pull more people aboard because we've lowered the price of entry. And so we have a chance to hook people. Now, it makes it really important that everything has got to be really amazing. And so there are the stakes of you got to make sure that every single one of those chapters is great. But so we put this all in front of Tony Renke, who was the head of Dynamics at the time. And so John was supposed to go upstairs to have a meeting with Tony about just about what the next steps were and how things were going. I was doing a lot of work with Sean Sharp, who was our new lead artist, and we were really excited. We were having all this fabulous sessions, storyboarding, just having a ball. Oh my god, I had so much fun doing that. So all those little cutscenes like you had in Betrayal at Krondor, we had all of those kind of lined out for Thief. Or actually, we didn't have them all. We were about halfway through. But anyway, so he has this meeting with Tony, and he's going up, and he's expecting that we're just going to talk about whatever. And Tony basically says, "Yeah, we're firing you." So they cut him go, and so he was just kind of in shock. He was not expecting that situation at all. It just sort of came out of the blue. So John gets fired. And then it says we're going to cancel the project. So meanwhile, so I'm down in my office, and so slowly we were off in our own little section of the office building because we had a whole floor, or maybe it was 2 floors that was in a little industrial complex building in Eugene, and so Krondor had its own little corner of the building that was ours. And so slowly the other members of the team were being paired off and sent to other teams. And so they were being sent to work on Aces and worked on the golf game and maybe upstairs. Yeah, I was upstairs to Star Siege. Mark Crow's office was directly above mine. So slowly but surely they emptied out my section of the building. And at one point, I was the only person in my section. There are 2 doors that led into it. And so I didn't even hear or see other people. And they're telling me, don't worry, Neal, we're not firing you. We've got some other projects that we like you, we have planned for you. And meanwhile, I'm losing my mind. They fired John, who's way the hell more experienced and smarter than I am. So I'm in my office every day, madly trying to come up with ideas for other games. It's like, what can I do? What's going to make some money for Dynamics that's going to give them a reason to keep me around? And finally, at one point, I found out from Ray Feist, because I had called Ray. I can't remember what circumstances were, but I called Ray, or Ray called me, and I said, I don't know what's going on. They're telling me they've got another project. But I don't get what's going on. He goes, well, I know what's going on, Neal. They have Arthur C. Clarke's license for Rendezvous with Rama. And so I got off the phone and go, holy crap, I get to adapt Arthur C. Clarke. That's amazing. Okay. So I get really excited about that. But unfortunately, Sierra decided to keep that in-house, and I didn't get to have that. So, but they said, don't worry about it. We want you to go ahead and do the sequel to Betrayal at Krondor. We want you to do the Thief of Dreams. Okay, great. I have no team. Oh, and by the way, we have to stick to this whole same thing, half the amount of time, third of the budget. And so I said, okay, well, I have a storyline and all this other stuff. And I said, okay, keep in mind is up to now, I've just been a designer. I haven't really been leading teams. I mean, I had people that I was sort of responsible for doing stuff for, but I wasn't a manager. I wasn't in charge of budgets and all this other stuff. But they handed me all this other stuff and say, well, we'll think about it. And we'll come back and we'll make the announcement, or we'll decide what we're going to do about the stuff. Okay, so I sat down with the budget of Betrayal at Krondor and the stuff that we were planning to do with Thief of Dreams, and I'm going over it. And I came back after the evening, and I was just going, there's just no way. I'm not a mathematician. I'm not an accountant, but I'm looking because I don't see any way that I can give people something that's playable, that people will enjoy, that's a worthy successor to Betrayal at Krondor, and do it with this. So I decided I would go to Pat Cook, who was also in the building. He did a lot of their sports titles were all Pat Cook from Dynamics. And he was a good friend of John's. And so I knew that he and John knew each other. They trusted each other. I said, if John trusted this guy, I can talk to Pat. And I said, I handed him everything that I had. I said, is this possible? could you do this given the certain things? You have much more experience. You've been a higher level person than I am. Can this be done? And so Pat said, well, sure thing. Neal, I'll take a look at this and I'll come back and we'll talk about it tomorrow. So he came back the next day and he says, no, there's just no way. He said, I could not do this with the restraints that have been given you. And particularly he's like, okay, I'm still new at this. You know, I've only been a game designer for 3.5, 4 years, you know, when this happens. And I don't know how I'm going to do it. My team is gone. They're all working on other teams. I'd have to hire all new team, get them to come in, hope to God I had the same synergy with them. And now I'm a manager managing the art department and programmers and all these other people at the same time, trying to do this insanely small task. So I've decided, well, I'm going to have to tell Tony, no, can't do it. Well, there's a meeting this afternoon, which is the big dynamics. Hello, we're going to get everybody together and talk about state of the company kind of thing, right? So they rented this space and we all go down to go to this big meeting. Tony's up there front and everybody's doing the, you know, having the hi, hello, and all this good stuff. And so they go through and Aces is doing well and we're talking about Willie Beamish 2 and we're, you know, all this other stuff that's going on. And towards the end he goes, oh, and I have a special announcement. He says, Neal Hallford will be leading the Betrayal at Krondor sequel. Everybody gets up clapping. I'm sitting in the back of the room going, I feel like such an asshole. And I'm just going, Tony completely fucking ambushed me in front of 300 of my peers. And there's no way I can do this, but I'm not going to stand up and say, well, no, Tony, you're an idiot. You know, I can't do this in front of him. But, you know, that evening I went, I stopped in my office and I wrote my little note of resignation and said, I am sorry, but there's just no way this is going to work. Mm-hmm. And thus endeth the tale of the Thief of Dreams, at least as you know it.
So far.
So far.
Yeah.
So that story is basically sat in a drawer for 30 years. And starting last year, a few years back, I had the idea that I was going to take a slightly modified version of that story and retell it with new characters, just kind of scratch out the serial numbers and release it. I mean, I had a Kickstarter that we were going to do it, but the thing about it is the more time I sat with it, it just was not gelling. It was just not happening the way I wanted. So I said, okay, I need to put this back in the drawer for a little while. And then first part of last year, I had a medical emergency. It was not related to Corona. But I was hospitalized from January 6th until the end of February last year. Mm-hmm. And I spent a lot of time thinking about, I almost died. And what am I going to do with the time I've got left on Earth? And looked at all the times that I've wasted and think opportunities I lost. And I came out of that with a determination that this was going to be a novel. I was going to finally release that novel. And I decided there were a lot of things that I needed to change about it. And lo and behold, once I decided that it was okay to change a few things, things started actually falling in place. And so, and my lovely friend Ilana here, who I'd gotten to know before all this happened, and I had been talking about stuff, and I was starting to take a great deal of inspiration from Ilana about, going back and getting my feet wet and finally taking this journey. And so she's been my inspiration to finally turn Thief of Dreams into a novel. And I have having a published, I mean, again, she's as he was saying before, she's a Kirkus reviewed novelist, and she just finished a trilogy from Tor. Tor is one of the best science fiction fantasy publishing houses on the planet. And if the fact that she believed in me and believed in the stuff that I did, that's given me the courage to go back and do something with Thief of Dreams. Now the characters are obviously, it's not Midkemia. I don't own Midkemia. Ray owns that universe. I can't do anything with that. But the same kind of arc, because the one thing that happened with Betrayal at Krondor is that the Betrayal at Krondor was supposed to be a trilogy of games, is Betrayal, Thief, and then yet untitled third game that was going to come after it, was always supposed to be about Owen's journey. And his ultimate path was he was going to end up being the magical advisor to King Liam. And that's where he was supposed to end up. And so the story that we're going to do in Thief of Dreams is going to be about someone who's a spy and they're a magician. And so there are a lot of things that I'm kind of lifting from the concept of that game that you never got to see, but there's a lot of new stuff too, and a lot of the texture of things has changed quite a bit. This will not feel like another this will not feel like rustic medieval fantasy. It comes a lot closer to sort of Russian late 1700s espionage and court intrigue and stuff like that. So I'm working on that novel right now, and so if you hear me talking about Thief of Dreams now, I'm referring to the novel and not to the game that you unfortunately never got to see. And so when you hear Thief of Dreams, that's what the hell we're talking about.
Right. And this will be about Irwin, not Owen. It'll be Irwin.
Yeah, Irwin. Yes, Irwin's twin brother. Yes. And
Johnny the Foot, and yeah.
Yes, but anyway, so I if you follow my Twitter or my blog or my Facebook pages, you'll hear me talking about Thief of Dreams. So that's what the hell I'm talking about in that context.
Good. Yeah, I wanted to make sure we covered that, and you definitely covered it well. So
before before we lose the people and go off into the other stuff, there's one thing I did want to bring up.
Yes.
Because in
LockDown.
addition to talking about the game, we're all doing our promotional spins here, right?
Yep.
So Thief of Dreams is going to be a little way down the road. I'd love to be able to say I can give it to you tomorrow.
Sure.
But I can't because I'm creating a whole brand new world for this thing or so whatever. So Ray had an entire team of people doing it for his novels. This is just me by myself. So give me a little bit of time, but I'm working on it. But so
LockDown.con. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Coming up at the end of June. Last year, one thing that I did after I got out of hospital, my wife and I said, let's do something. We go to Comic-Con every year. I host panels on writing for the computer gaming industry and also in film and some other stuff. And I said, we're obviously not going to have that in person, so we want to do something. So we brainstormed this crazy idea for LockDownCon. And so I convinced a bunch of people to come and play with me, which kind of shocked me because we had an amazing fantasy author panel. So Lana was on that for us, but I also had Tad Williams. I had Tim Powers. We had David. Okay, I've forgotten his name. I feel bad about that, but he was sort of a last minute because Elizabeth Hand had originally been there, but she got tied up, so I had to have her come in. But anyway, we had a fabulous convention that happened last year. So we've been debating about whether we were going to do this again this year. But granted, while things are still opening up and we're progressing towards probably everything being significantly better by September and the possibility of conventions being back by the end of next year, we decided there's still enough people locked down and it's still enough people that want to go have that experience and not feeling safe and going out and doing stuff. So let's do LockDownCon II. So that said, Ilana will be joining us again for our fantasy panel. I've got some other amazing people already lined up for the fantasy panel. And Damjan is going to be joining us for an indie games panel. So we'll be talking about his game a little bit more. But we're also going to be talking to the people behind Odd Gods are going to be with us. Is it Long Roads, Tough Roads, something like that? Yeah, but they're a developer down in Australia. I'm sorry if I butcher this. I also want to have Greg McMartin, was a guy that I worked with at Cave Dog whenever I worked on Dungeon Siege. He was developing a game called Amen the Awakening, which was another shooter that unfortunately got canceled. But he does a ARG called the Consortium, and so he's going to be on that panel. So those are just a couple of the panels we've got going. We're going to have a hard science panel talking about exploration above and below the sea. There's going to be a couple of other writing panels. And so we hope that you will, and we're going to have a Star Trek panel because my buddy Larry Nemechek, who I'm also a director of photography for a documentary about a a science fiction convention gone spectacularly gone wrong called the Con of Wrath. But Larry's going to be there, and we're going to have a convention talking about Star Trek. What is Trek, what is not Trek. We're going to have some people who worked on the shows, who worked on comics, who worked on the books, and we're going to have a discussion about what is Trek whenever we talk about that stuff. So anyway, that's LockDownCon. We don't have the page updated for this year, so if you go to LockDownCon.com right now, it's last year's stuff. But on Twitter, on Facebook, I'm already kind of talking about this stuff. We have a LockDownCon page on Facebook. So I hope that you will come by and kind of be there to participate. Again, it's online. It's 100% free, and we like sci-fi, fantasy, comics, science, all that good stuff in a big old bag, and gaming, obviously. So anyway, so that's my big spiel and part of my promotional corner of our little stuff here today.
Perfect. Gee, that sounds like we're signing off.
well,
Sounds like...
I'm just saying that since we were getting close to the 2-hour mark here or something before we lost. I mean, we've got 219 people in the room. It's amazing we held on to them this long.
Oh, no.
And said, we're here to like play games, and you guys are all talking. But just like Betrayal at Krondor, there's some point at which everyone does stop talking and we play game.
That's right. No, but this is. But I think this is a good point to wrap it up, at least for this segment. And I will be continuing in a little bit. I'm going to take a short little break, but I'm going to be continuing with the start of a playthrough of Betrayal at Krondor coming up here. And first of all, and all of you are welcome to stick around if you want. And we'll see how it goes. But in any case, first of all, I definitely want to thank Neal Hallford for gracing us with your presence. And again, it's just again one of my all-time favorite games, period, and certainly one of my more memorable game playing experiences ever. So thank you very much. Ilana C Myer again. The Poet King is out in paperback just this week. So you want to check out her website. And Damjan Mozetič, who is, again, the game designer. He's behind the Call of Saregnar, which it won't be out this week or this month, but it's definitely something to look forward to. He's also got a demo available, I think, to Patreon supporters and whatnot. It's well worth looking at. Anyway, thanks to everybody. Thank you so much for
support these people.
Yes,
They're
support all of these people. Even this dope on the top right here. But looks
yes.
But we're going to take a short break here, and when we come back, we're going to start a playthrough of Betrayal at Krondor. So again, thanks everybody.
And I'll be hanging out probably in the chat.
Cool.
So if you want to talk or ask me questions, I will be there. So whenever he comes back, I will be there.
Yes, and my apologies. There were a number of people who were asking questions in chat, and unfortunately, it was kind of hard to keep up with all of them. So there's your opportunity to be able to.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's just like I'm sorry that we've kind of just focused on doing our thing here or whatever.
It's all because Damjan just won't shut up.
He's so damn. He's just talkative, just talking our ears off, just interrupting me all the time, just so inconsiderate.
I'm sorry.
He'll get his. He'll get his. He'll get into it, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But anyway, thanks very much, everybody. And again, we'll see you shortly. So I'll be right back.